Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Debunking the Peter Principle. My name is Q Pham, and I am the CEO of Archer Now LLC. A little bit about my company. We've been in existence almost nearly a decade at this point, and we developed our company based off of two basic philosophies. The first philosophy is that we believe data aggregation, data analytics, and business intelligence should be left to every single company out there, no matter the size, large or small. Today's existence, most large corporations are the only ones that can afford departments that do business analytics. We hope to bridge that gap with a lot of small businesses out there. And then our second philosophy is that we also prefer to demystify the credit reporting system together. So we go around the country and we educate communities and homeowners on the lack of scariness the credit reporting system is and how you can leverage that actually to be able to help your communities out. So with that in mind, before we dive in, I want to talk a little bit about my background. I was born in Saigon, Vietnam. I migrated to the United States with my mother and my aunt at the age of 2. This year marks the 25th year that I've been in accounting and finance. I've been basically in the HOA, Homeowners Association, and real estate industry for the vast majority of my life, specific to the accounting and finance support side of things. My educational background is in accounting, finance, business, and weirdly enough, psychology. So if you've ever followed my series of talks over the years, you realize there's a lot of psychological elements that we try to infuse in both of our business practices and our organizational leadership. And it's become such a large branding thing these days where you look at industrial psychology, organizational psychology, that you see rampant throughout all of the business community. So hopefully you get a little bit of insight out of that as well. And so a lot of my talks will stem foundationally from the Peter Principle. So having said that, before we get into the Peter Principle, I want to actually allude you guys to a human resources model called the employee life cycle, right? If anybody here knows or has been around HR, it's a very simple modeling that talks about the life cycle of an employee from the time they're a prospective employee all the way to the point where they're no longer an employee at the organization. So really quickly, if you look at the slide over here, you'll see that we're talking about 6 major core phases within the life cycle of an employee at your company: attraction, recruitment, onboarding, retention, growth, and offboarding. If you notice that the weird cycle in the middle of that is actually where most of us reside at any given point in time in our organization, right? So let's just repeat that and start to say that again with ourselves, right? Onboarding, retention, and growth. This is specifically what we're going to be addressing today in our talk about the Peter Principle. Now, having said that, let's kind of dive a little bit into some of these steps before we get a little bit further so we can provide better context to our talk today, right? So attraction. When you think of an attraction step within a company, how do you attract people to apply within your organization? Well, you have to have a brand. You have to have a brand that you recognize, and you have to have a consistent business culture, right? Think of Southwest Airlines. Think of Starbucks, where everybody goes, hey, they have great benefits, right? Go work there. So then once you get them through the door and they're applying for your organization, you're now talking about recruitment, right? The number one thing a lot of businesses make the mistake of not doing when they deal with recruitment is actually giving people a proper employee value proposition. What is an employee value proposition? Well, it's essentially what sets you apart from the 4 or 5 other jobs that they're applying to at the exact same time, right? You're talking about compensation, benefits, stability, hell, the commute. These days. Are you working remotely? Are you 15 minutes away? Or are you an hour away from work, right? Now we get into the meat and potatoes of the employee life cycle. Let's talk about onboarding. On your first day of your new team member, do you go around and introduce people, the key players of the organization, to the new person? Do you set proper expectations of what their job duties are, right? So that they can be successful. When you deal with retention, are we talking about some sort of reward and recognition program within your organization? Do you do that at all? Do you praise people whenever they do something well, right? Whether it's monetarily, or either it's just an attaboy whenever you do in the next, squad meeting or something like that. And then, of course, we're talking about growth, which leads into this whole conversation today. When we talk about growth, we're talking about professional development, and we're talking about expanding someone's job purpose. And, of course, we're talking about promotions, right? Now, I want to take a time out for a second. And I kind of want to talk about something that probably sounds a little, let's say, unpopular, Typically, a lot of things I say sometimes come across as a little unpopular. Probably in the last 15, 20 years, we've started to tell ourselves in the business community that when I'm at work, this is my work family, right? The truth of the matter is, I think that's an outdated concept, and it's an incorrect concept. What we do at work together is not a family dynamic, right? Families are dysfunctional. Families do things regardless of what benefit you get back. You can't really get rid of your own family, all right? What you do at a company and at an organization is actually building a team, a high-functioning, high-level team. In a cheesy way, you're building a championship-level team, right? One thing we have to demystify today when we talk about these conversations is the social contract between an employee and an employer has to be mutually beneficial for both parties. At some point when it no longer becomes beneficial for either the employee or the employer, somebody use the exit stage left, right? So, having said that, let's dive in. What is the Peter Principle? Show of hands, anybody here have heard the Peter Principle? Okay, actually pretty good amount of people. So here's the interesting thing about the Peter Principle. It was actually developed by a Canadian sociologist and had nothing to do with the business sector whatsoever in the late 60s. Dr. Lawrence Johnston Peter actually developed the Peter Principle and named it after himself. The interesting thing about the Peter Principle is over 30 publishers denied publishing his book before he finally got someone to publish him in 1969. And the reason was, it was too pessimistic and it was too morose, and nobody wanted to read it. Well, eventually it got published. It took a couple decades later before the business community picked up on it and realized that what we were doing in the workplace was very similar to what the Peter Principle was talking about. So, what is the Peter Principle? In a nutshell, if you read through all the jargons in its chapters, it ultimately sums down to this. The Peter Principle is the idea that we take a very high-functioning, highly competent employee, and we continue to promote them throughout the years until they get to a job they can no longer perform well. So, let's think about that for a second. We take someone that is highly valuable in a certain position, and we continue to promote them until at some point they can't do the job. Now, we're not saying that's correct. We're not saying we buy everything Dr. Peters talks about, but that's kind of the crux of our conversation today, right? So, let's dive into it a little bit deeper. When you think about the Peter Principle, there's a few assumptions that Dr. Peters makes, right? One of the first things he makes is that us as employees have a finite ceiling when it comes to our development, our finite ceiling when it comes to our progress and our expansion of our skill sets, right? The second thing, and probably the most powerful assumption that we see today, is that the vast majority of the business community hires and promotes people based off of rewarding for what they've done in the past, rather than finding people that fits that promotion job, right? I kind of slaughtered that a little bit. So I really want to re-emphasize this point. Most of us today promote people in our organization as a thank you for what they did, not for finding the right person for that particular job. You can do both, but most of us fail to do that. Let's go over some examples. Here's one example. Sally, she's in our accounting department. She's highly efficient. She's fantastic. She's easy to work with. She always shows up on time. She never calls in sick. She does the work of 2 people in her team, right? Highly functioning accountant. Her supervisor is actually retiring. The controller of the organization, the accounting director of the organization is retiring. What does the company do? Their natural first step is to immediately go to Sally. Sally is the most senior person there. She knows the ins and outs. She knows the workflows. We're going to promote Sally. And of course, Sally's going to accept this promotion, right? Because it comes with a corner office. It comes with a reserved parking spot. It comes with a 20% raise. Most of us, whether we wanted the job or knew it existed, would probably say yes. Let's be honest with ourselves, right? Well, what happens? What the company failed to notice during their evaluation process is that Sally very rarely communicates with other people because, just like me, she's a pretty introverted accountant. On top of that, she has never been involved with training any new staff members on the accounting team. And she's a little nervous about public speaking. So let's fast forward 9 months. What happens? Sally's department no longer hits their financial reporting goals, right? They can't get any financials out on time, and they can't ever close the books out on time. Sadly enough, Sally gets fired. This is a very prime example of one of the major fallacies with the Peter Principle that Dr. Peters is kind of correct about, right? So we deal with the fact that we took a highly functioning person like Sally, and we just assumed because she's a great employee and that she loves the company and the culture of the organization, that she was going to be a good leader, that she was going to be able to lead a team and train people. Here's another example, a little bit more fun example. Hopefully you guys will pick up on who I'm talking about here. There's a gentleman named Tom. He went to the University of Michigan. When he got to the University of Michigan, he was 7th-string quarterback. Didn't start for a few years. Through a lot of hard work and a lot of luck and attrition, he managed to start for the University of Michigan. He later on went to spend 23 years in the NFL, win 7 Super Bowls, and 3 league MVPs. I think you guys know who I'm talking about. Well, if anybody watched the NFL last year and any of the games that he commentated at, you'll realize that the day he retired, Fox Sports gave him a 10-year, $375 million contract for a guy that's never publicly spoke, never broadcasted, or never commentated, right? What could go wrong? Well, I am an avid NFL watcher, and I will tell you this, and there's probably some Tom Brady apologists in the crowd, but I can wholeheartedly say that he subjected most of these viewers to painfully boring rants and shallow, unimaginative commentary such as, the team that typically scores more points wins, right? So in all jest and stuff like that, we could see a world in the next few years where Fox probably buys him out of his contract, and in 2028, he tries to start for another NFL team at the age of 51. Now, what is this cheesy story actually telling us? It also tells us another fun lesson, that those that can do don't necessarily mean they can teach or that they can lead either, right? That's a very common fallacy. We always joke with teachers about, those that can't do teach. But sometimes the other way works around as well. Don't just assume that just because they're good at doing something that they're good at explaining things to others as well. So, all right, well, this is getting pretty depressing, right? So how do we go about dealing with this, and how do we get around this, right? I can't internally promote because Sally can't do the job right, but I can't bring people from outside because what is that going to do to our culture? Well, just because the Peter Principle has some merits to it doesn't mean that we have to take Peter's Principle on face value, right? I'm standing up here in the firm belief that over the hundreds of different companies I've interacted with in my work career and my consulting career, we should still value internal promotions. There's 4 main reasons why we should do that. The first is the fact that at a foundational level, if you want to bring in and infuse new ideas and new talents, right, do that at an entry-level position. Bring in people from all walks of life at an entry-level position, but save those senior positions for people that have been in your organization that understand the ethos of your organization and the culture of your organization. Internal promotions sends a very strong message, right? It sends a message that a company prioritizes their team members and their further development. Hiring an entry-level person is actually a great thing when you hire them from outside, because what it also does is it frees up time from your current team from doing mundane transactional things and being able to then expand their skill sets so that they can be ready for some of these higher level senior roles within your organization. A consistent trend in our organization of internal promotions sends a very clear message and a strong employee morale, right? Promoting from outside has the exact converse effect. So, we've talked about internal promotions, about why it's a good thing. We've talked about the pitfalls of doing internal promotions. So how do we get around this, right? Well, just like everything else you guys do in your organizations as leaders today, you have to plan for success. You have to plan for growth. 10 years ago when we opened up our doors and we had 1 client and only a couple employees, we didn't know what to do. We were just happy to be around. Well, then we added another client, and then we added more, and then we added more employees. And then all of a sudden we hit 20 employees. Now we have to bring in HR. We had to build an infrastructure, right? So you plan as an organization, but a lot of times we fail to plan for our team members. So in the Peter Principle, I think it's around chapter 6 or 7, he alludes to 2 different types of planning for the promotion. One's called a push promotion and one's called a pull promotion. A push promotion is essentially where an employee proactively on their own goes out and seeks all the help and development they may need to take that next level in their career, right? That may be going to night school and getting your MBA. That may be going out and getting some speech classes so you feel a little less awkward talking in front of people, right? Developing interpersonal skills with people, just going out and mingling. Whatever those are, that proactiveness from an employee is considered a push promotion. A pull promotion is actually very common in a lot of our organizations, and it should be highly promoted. A pull promotion is the concept of a mentorship program, right? We firmly believe at Archer that every member of our senior leadership team should also be mentors, right? We should be proactively trying to pull the next wave and next generation of people in our organization up. One of the first things I learned when I entered the workforce from one of my original mentors was this lesson. The only time you get promoted is if you're willing to learn and train your successor, right? You don't get to move on up until you're ready to train somebody else. There's nothing more toxic in a work environment than those handful of employees that hoard knowledge like they hoard gold, right? They may be some of your higher performing people, the truth is, right? Sally may be there socially recluse and she's working, she's grinding, and she does great, but she's also so afraid to share her knowledge to everybody else because, gosh, if everybody else knows, maybe I become indispensable. That's the wrong way of thinking. And those are the type of individuals that are actually long-term going to hurt your team rather than help your team. So there are 3 ideas of how you overcome the Peter Principle. The first one is going to be the hardest one, and it's the idea of transparency. In the world that we live in today, it is so damn hard for us to apologize or admit when we're wrong. We notice that personally, we notice that professionally, hell, we notice that politically. That is one of the first pitfalls that we have to overcome in order to overcome the Peter Principle. In your organization today, if you scan all of your team members and you look at someone and go, gosh, they're probably not in the right role, you have to be honest with yourself and you have to be honest with your team member that you made a mistake, that you promoted the wrong person, no matter how painful that is. Because not only are you doing that, but you're also hurting 2 positions simultaneously at the same time. The one you pulled them out of, and now the one they're ill-equipped to do. The second concept of overcoming the Peter Principle is alternative rewards. Who is to say that the only outlet for you to make more money in your organization is to get a promotion, right? I know most of us have worked for large corporations where the best you get is 2% unless you're aiming for a promotion. So what it does psychologically is we've created this culture for ourselves in business where the only way for us to make any significant money or achieve some of our financial goals is to get these higher level positions, right? You see jobs all the time, like, I got to land this deal. If I land this deal, I'll get all the skins on the wall and I'll be able to land this job or land this promotion, right? We need to demystify that as well, right? There is nothing wrong with paying somebody more simply because they are an invaluable resource at the position they're at. Maybe you get creative and you change up the different types of responsibilities they have. Maybe you give them some type of bonus or profit sharing incentivized program. It doesn't have to necessarily be the promotion. But having that transparency with these folks and sitting down with them and being honest and saying, listen, we'll find the right fit for you. This just might not be it, right? And that's an okay thing to have. It's an okay conversation to have. And then the last thing is one that I've been probably chanting from the rooftops for years about, right? It's the idea of EQ, high EQ individuals. Most of you guys probably know what that is, right? EQ is emotional intelligence. We focus so much in the interview process when we're sourcing people of how smart someone is, how much degrees they have, all these various skill sets. Not once do we ever in an interview actually talk about someone's business maturity or emotional intelligence. I would postulate that EQ beats IQ out every single damn day of the week. We can teach you skill sets that are prerequisite to do the job well. What we cannot teach you is business maturity. What we cannot teach you is an individual that's willing to take negative criticism and not take it personally. So, having said that, I want to backstep a little bit. I want to put myself back again for all these years into the role of an employee, right? Back when I used to work for others, I asked myself a series of questions all the time. One of the first questions I always want to ask and talk to an employee is this. When you go out and you apply for a job within your organization as that's a promotion, are you doing it solely motivated by the salary that it comes with? Right? Do you actually want to do that job? Do you want to do something different with that job and add more to that layer of the position? Or you're just looking to get paid more. There's nothing wrong with that, but then let's have that conversation about pay, not the promotion, right? Is your job merely a means to an end, an ends to a mean, right? That's okay too. This is a transactional job, right? For most of us, it has to be mutually beneficial. We have to get jobs for us to be able to live the kind of lifestyle we want to live. But also be realistic with yourself, right? Whatever you put out there, whatever energy you put into something is usually what's reciprocated back. So keep that in mind whenever you have context of things. Are you also ready for the additional responsibilities of more money and more responsibilities? A higher profile position, right? This is a very important thing to understand as well. And this is not one of those foo-foo, he's standing up here and, oh my gosh, like the horrors of making a certain amount of money and the certain amount of responsibilities. But the truth of the matter is, that does kind of paint a larger target for you, right? In large corporations, we see it all the time. Who are the people that they're redlining through? It's always usually the people in the higher 5% of the pay scale. So that's not a bad thing. You should embrace that challenge. Just make sure you're ready for that challenge, right? And lastly, and in my opinion, most importantly, as you go into a senior leadership role, are you willing to build a winning team, a high-functioning winning team? Or are you, what you're really doing is building a bunch of yes people that are complementary to you because you're the star on the team? That is a very important distinction, right? I've learned a long time ago that I am definitely not the smartest guy in the room. I like to surround myself by much more mature, emotionally, and intellectually intelligent people. Because for me, the ceiling of that team is infinite. If all you do is surround yourself by people that are dumber than you and say yes to you, the ceiling is you. So, final takeaways. Anybody after lunch that got sleepy and completely forgot what I was ranting on for the last 20 plus minutes? There's 4 key takeaways I want you guys to take from this, right? The first is this: understand the employee life cycle for every member of your team. At what stage are they at, right? Are they at the growth stage? Are they at the onboarding stage, right? Know where they're at so that you know what to attend to for their next level of development. Number 2, promotions are about the future, not about the past. It does not mean you can't reward someone for all their years of service and their years of great attitudes, right? But also make sure this person positions you and your company and that division for what's going to be taking in the next few years, not what's happening before. Number 3, EQ beats IQ every day of the week. Surround yourself by emotionally intelligent people, and you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. I think the next time I go to an interview and one of the applicant goes, you ask one of those canned questions like, what are your strengths? And if somebody ever told me I have a high level of emotional intelligence, I would probably just my head would explode. I would probably immediately hire them, maybe even probably hire them at a higher rate than what was listed in the ad, because that is a powerful message. That means that they understand the importance of that. And last but not least, it sounds cheesy, but you got to be honest with yourself and you got to be honest with the others. You got to be genuine about that situation, right? So I leave you the parting thought of the wonderful former First Lady, Rosalind Carter. And she said this: a leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but where they ought to be. Thank you for your time today.
We have a couple more minutes if you want to take.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
A few more minutes.
Yeah, a quick Q&A. Sorry I ran a little early. I didn't know if anybody wanted to comments, concerns, yell at me. Yes, ma'am.
Do you want me to use the microphone, or are we good?
Sure, no, I can hear you just fine.
Okay. So let's get back to Sally. So there's a position open, and her boss left.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you have that conversation with her that she's not appropriate for that position, and you're going to be looking for somebody outside the organization? Because that's going to also cause
Sure.
feelings, and she may not be the standout employee she is right now.
Absolutely. Great question. So I would also frame a little bit more context behind that question. I think for example, my organization has made this mistake in the past of blatantly going out and immediately offering a promotion to someone. We don't even know if Sally wants the gig. She may be completely happy and content in her world and kicking ass and doing what she does, right? So I think the first thing we need to do is when you have any type of internal positions, you need to post it out to the entire company. Even if you roll your eyes and go, man, there's no way John's gonna get that job, right? But it needs to be on a fair playing field. So I would say the first thing is Sally needs to be the one to initiate that conversation of wanting that, right? Now, having said that, let's say you really think she's the right fit for that position. Then you now sit down with her and you kind of go through, Sally, these are great areas that you bring to the table. Here's some deficiencies that we feel that if you shore that up, you'll be great. Conversely, to answer your question, if she's in a position where she really wants a job and you're just like, I don't know it's the right fit, I think what you do is you probably put her on some kind of probationary period, right? You obviously don't say, nobody likes that term. But you go, hey, why don't we do this? Like, I think you're gonna be great in this field. You really haven't had a whole lot of experience with training people and also having to be on the fly and dealing with clients whenever they're upset. Like, why don't we put you on a 90-day plan where we just kind of phase you in, we'll get you the proper level of training along the way to help you. And then that way, if you feel in 90 days it's still not the right fit for you, your old position's still there for you, right? Yes, sir.
How do you know that you've promoted someone above their level of competence until you've actually seen them perform at the next position? I mean, I understand what you're saying is you try to ascertain whether or not they're capable of
Sure.
the promotion. Right? Like that one lady saying, oh, well, she's not a people person, she's never trained anybody, she's kind of a worker bee. But sometimes you don't know, right?
Absolutely. And I would say the answer to that is $1 billion answer, right? Like if we knew that, we'd always hire the right people as well from outside the organization. Sometimes you have a script, you have a profile of what you're looking for in that position. Like for us, when we build teams, we also build complementary psychological teams as well, right? Like you don't want everyone to be completely quiet, but you also don't want everybody chatting all the time. You need a good healthy mix. And so I would say if you trust your system and this is the profile you have and Sally fits that profile, heck yeah, give her a chance, right? So, but yeah, just like the crapshoot it is in hiring people, you never know until somebody actually performs the job. But I think the important thing is conscientiously, we need to make sure we set Sally up for success and give her all the tools and training for her to be prepared instead of throwing her to the wayside whenever she has no support. Yes, sir.
An organization that wants to promote internally, what tools are they doing to assess people's potential as opposed to their performance?
One of the things I mentioned a couple years ago when I was talking about kind of like dealing with labor and also recognizing things, one of the first things I always like to tell people is at the resume stage, when you interview a new person, right, that's probably the last time we see the resume. What the reality is, make more mental notes. If somebody comes from a background that maybe they taught a couple years at a community college, that leans yourself to maybe they're pretty good at teaching people things, right? Or they have an artistic background, which may lend you to helping out with the branding and the marketing part of your department. So being able to know that, yeah, they're applying for an accounting job, but maybe they have other skill sets that later on down the road would be beneficial to them and your organization. So you can start building out those profiles now to be able to help kind of build upon that, right? And I think that really helps to paint a better picture to intimately understand what your employees can offer, as well as what they may want to be doing long term.
So you mean we have to actually read the resumes
Yes, yes. I think that would be a good idea. Instead of just, I mean, we run through the motions, and I can tell you guys this. It is getting so much harder. I think everyone here would agree with me. It's getting so much harder to hire people. People have gotten so darn good in interviews, right? Confidentially, we hired an individual a few years ago. So good. We were so excited about the position. Somehow, on the first couple days of work, we found out they actually didn't speak any English. Like, I know it sounds completely silly to think about, but that's how prepared people are getting. That's how, savvy people are getting. So we have to find new ways of doing it. One of the favorite things I like to do is nothing obtrusive, but I like to make some kind of conversation where they feel a little uncomfortable, putting them up against a little bit of stress, just to see how they react to something like that, right? We got to get away from these canned questions all the time. What's your pros? What's your cons? What do you like to do? It's got to be more succinct than that. So, all right. Thank you again, everybody. Appreciate your time.